Good morning. Thank you, Chasta. My name is Dana Contreras. I'm lecturer in Geospatial Science at Cardiff University and vice-chairman of the Earthquake Engineering Field Investigation Team in UK. Today, I'm going to present the results of the discussion of post-disaster practices via Ludwig activities, the case of 2015 Gorkha earthquake and 2022 Nepal return mission. This is the content of the presentation. There will be a brief introduction that includes the case study area, the description of the methodology, the corresponding results, and the preliminary conclusions. This methodology was designed as a non-structural mitigation action to reduce cascading risk and enhance business continuity by learning about post-disaster phases. But for the case of Nepal, I adapted it to discuss post-disaster recovery practices. The methodology is based on questions and Ludwig activities to stimulate the discussion. This methodology has been applied in Colombia, Austria, Italy, Chile, and now Nepal, and I have to say that it is still on development. Introduction. At 11:56 Nepal time, which means 6:11 Coordinated Universal Time, on this date, an earthquake with this magnitude struck Nepal. The epicenter was located near to the town of Gorkha. It is approximately 80 kilometers to the west of Kathmandu, the capital of the country. This is the death. More than 8,000 people died. Almost 22,000 were injured, and this number of people were homeless. The earthquake triggered numerous landslides and caused an avalanche in the Everest that killed 19 people among Sherpas and climbers. In this year, the Earthquake Engineering Field Investigation Team deployed a return mission to check the progress of the recovery, and in the framework of this mission, this methodology was applied. The methodology comprises 4 activities. Preliminary questions about the experience of participants with earthquakes and knowledge of the urban environment. The first Ludwig activity was about learning with puzzles as a Ludwig activity without information about disaster recovery. Afterwards, I explained the concept of recovery and the characteristics of each post-disaster phase. And the second Ludwig activity is learning with vehicles and construction machinery. I formulated 12 questions using an interactive presentation tool to guarantee anonymity in the answers. In this slide, we can see the images of the formulation of questions with the QR to access the interactive tool, examples of the questions, and images of the discussion. The first Ludwig activity employs 3 kinds of puzzles that differ in size, complexity, and completeness. For the exercise, the first puzzle is almost complete, the second is half done, and the last one, the more complex, is totally to be done. This activity is thought as a metaphor for planning the reconstruction of a city after an earthquake because the participants have to coordinate into each group how to complete the puzzle in the shortest time. Now, the size of the puzzles represent the size of the affected area, the number of pieces, the number of buildings, the completeness, the number of collapsed or damaged buildings, and the age, the difficulty of the situation. And the participants are the stakeholders involved in the reconstruction of the city. After this activity, I proceed to explain the characteristics of each recovery phase to the participants. In the relief or emergency response, the priority is to save lives. During the early recovery, start the transition to the normality, and during the recovery, return to the normality, and in the development phase is to go beyond the state that existed before the earthquake and learn from the lessons of the earthquake, to increase the resilience. In the second LUIC activity, the names of the post-disaster phases are plotted in a banner. The participants need to allocate a set of vehicles and construction machines to each post-disaster phase according to their judgment. The aim of this activity is to facilitate the discussion of each post-disaster phase in the case study area. Here they are already arranged, but for the time of the activity they are mixed. So the activity goes like that. Here we can see the exercise starting, the discussion. Now the results. In this slide we can see the results of the questions. I don't pretend that you read. I made a summary. So, of course, being in Nepal, all the participants had experienced an earthquake. One participant believed that there was a post-disaster recovery plan at the moment of the earthquake. The others answered that not, and at the moment the answer had also divided if there is a current post-disaster recovery plan. Most of the participants state to know what to do in case of an earthquake, and they suggest appropriate emergency response actions. They are familiar with the secondary effects of the earthquakes, especially landslides. They identify the post-disaster phases. They had a confusion with the concepts of lifelines, urban facilities, and critical facilities. And they mention the common long-term effects of the earthquakes in general. The participants consider that the puzzles with the highest complexity reflects the case of Nepal. And for the second activity, this was the initial result. Here we see the discussion. And this is the final results with emergency vehicles and construction machinery in the emergency or relief phase and the early recovery phase, and buses and during the recovery phase, and the train and the recycling car during the development. What it was new or surprising for this case, it was the backhoe that in other application of the methodology was usually allocated to the early recovery. For this case, was allocated to the emergency response phase. According to the participants, it's necessary to use the backhoe to remove the earth from landslides to unblock roads for performing the emergency response task, and also to look for survivals. Another finding was that, of course, it's necessary to adapt the methodology to each case study area. So, in the case of Nepal, the most frequent transport media are the motorcycles and the different kind of rickshaws. Conclusions. Post-disaster phases and emergency response actions are well known. If there is a post-disaster recovery plan, it needs to be socialized among population, and some terms need to be clarified. And these discussions allow to contrast our hypothesis with the facts described by local population. I believe that the impact of COVID in the progress of the reconstruction was high, and the participants considered that not. The vehicles and construction machines were easily associated with the post-disaster recovery phases, but the activity with the puzzles need more explanation. It is necessary to adapt the methodology to each case study areas, and small groups are better to ensure the participation of everyone. Both ludic activities generate excitement across different ages and even teenagers. But the point with the teenagers is they they get bored with the questions, with the preliminary questions. These are the main reference of this research, and thank you.